Hello everybody, my name is Kaitlyn and today we are live from Columbia State Historic Park. I am interpretive aide here and today I would like to invite you back into Columbia because this would normally be one of our busiest seasons of the year. However, it is most important to make sure that everybody is safe, so I want to thank everybody for flattening the curve during this time by making sure to avoid to practice physical distancing, to wash their hands regularly, to avoid gathering in large groups. And today, what I would like to talk to you all about is something a little different from what we usually talk about in Columbia. Because normally, when we're talking about Columbia, we're talking about the miners and the merchants, the explorers, the bankers, the settlers. But today I want to talk about not the adults of Columbia, I want to talk about the children of Columbia. And almost certainly there were children here in Columbia. For one thing, every time that people are settling to the area, they're taking their children with them. And especially later on in the period, sometimes people specifically settle here in order to start families. So we definitely know there were children in here in Columbia from the very start. But the first time we had an official count of how many children were here in Columbia was on March 26, 1856. It's the first official count of children in Columbia, and there were 298 children from the ages of about 4 to 18, and there were 86 under 4 years old. So compared to the population of Columbia, that was a respectable number of kids. So while the adults were doing all these other things that we're talking about all the time here in Columbia, what were the kids doing? Well, I mean, what were kids doing today? Well, most of the time, kids are going to school today, right? That's like their jobs. They go to school. But during the gold rush, school wasn't a right like it is today. It was an enormous privilege because one, you didn't always have a school to go to, and two, there were often other things that were higher prioritized by school, usually because they weren't public schools like they are today. They were private, so you had to pay to go to them. So if you had the opportunity to go to school, in Columbia we knew that there were several Sabbath schools and several private schools where people were teaching children out of their own homes, but there were no public schools yet. But by the time that they had made this count of children in Columbia, that was very soon to change, because 2 days earlier, on November 24th, 1856, Silver Street School, and that's going to be one of my visual aids there, was opened by a man named Robert Porterfield as a public school. Now, Miss Susan Chamberlain, who was a woman who had previously been running a private school, joined him just a short while later, also teaching public school. Now the thing is, neither of these public schools lasted very long. In fact, no school that became a public school in Columbia was a public school for longer than 3 months, and 3 months exactly. And there's a very specific reason for that. And that's because the funding for schools during the gold rush was based on the qualifications they had to have was you had to run for 3 months consecutively, and then you would get your funding. But the funding was coming from the sale of land. And do you think it's super easy to keep track of the sale of land during the gold rush, where everyone's sitting down and squatting and just grabbing whatever they happen to live on, or they're having mining rights distributions? No, it was extremely difficult. And so every time these public schools would run as a public school for 3 months, get what little money they could, and then the funding would run out. And then they would reopen again as private schools because they had to keep the doors open somehow. But all of that changed. My apologies. In 1858. In 1858, the laws changed so that schools could be funded out of taxes. So people in their communities would pay out of their taxes in order to go specifically towards public school funding. And over the next 3 years, the people of Columbia bought a large land plot on where I'm standing right now on Cemetery Hill, where there was nice cheap land. They spent a total of $155, and they purchased what would become the Columbia Schoolhouse. We're standing in it today. This schoolhouse is the oldest two-story brick schoolhouse in California. And it opened for term in 1861. Now, you can imagine what it would have been like to be a child here in Columbia. But although we can certainly imagine what it was like to have school, even in 1860, what would children be doing when they weren't at school? Either because they couldn't afford it when it was only private schools, or during the rest of their days. Well, for one thing, children during the gold rush had a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. They would be doing all they could to work jobs, or to help raise their younger siblings, or to help with running their households. They had a lot of responsibility. But, just like the children of today, the children during the gold rush needed to be able to play. It was a very vital point in this life process, that they needed to be able to interact with each other, build their skills, and have fun. So today, I'm going to be demonstrating and showing off some of the ways that children would have played during the gold rush. The first category of toys I have are right before me. So, if you're getting toys today, you are probably purchasing them from a store, right? Maybe even an online store, if you're buying video games, right? So I actually have the first advertisement we have in Columbia. In December 20th of 1858, we have advertisements in our Columbia Gazette advertising sale of toys for Christmas and New Year's gifts for children. And they range in price from about 10 cents to $20, including carriages and horses, omnibuses, engines, Swiss cottages, sets of furniture, rubber balls, babies in carriages, panoramas, drums, peddlers' wagons, brass trumpets, etc. Now, some of these you can see directly how they correlate to toys that we have today, things like instruments, things like dolls and miniature furniture and miniature cars and trucks, or the equivalents. One of the things which I think people might not recognize today is a panorama. So a panorama is something that was happening during this early period, and what would happen is there is a bit of cloth scroll inside of a box on winding knobs. There would be a lens that you would look through, and as you twisted the knobs, a scene would play by and the images would move. This was considered a somewhat educational tool for children. It would have scenes of historical relevance, so things like the American Revolution. It would have visions of the greatest 7 wonders of the world. It would have things like fairy tales, like Hansel and Gretel and Humpty Dumpty. And you can actually see these in examples of modern toy manufacturers today, that they had made samples of these during the gold rush. Now, you remember I said that these are going to range in cost from about 10 cents to $20? That was a lot of money during the gold rush. To put that in context, most miners are making about $2 in profit after paying off all of their dues per day. So a lot of people, especially people who had parents that were struggling, wouldn't have been able to afford these toys. Instead, what people would have been playing with are things that they could have, that they could find and scavenge from around the house and make their own fun with. So I had put up some riddles for people to post on Facebook for me, and I hear that you guys have been looking for them and trying to come up with the answers. Riddles and songs are definitely one of the things that would have been a major source of entertainment at home. Families would sing together and play singing games together, and they would also try to challenge each other with riddles. So my first riddle is, a child is born in Boston, Massachusetts, to parents who were born in Boston, Massachusetts. But this child is not a United States citizen. How is this possible? Now, you've all had some time if you saw this on Facebook earlier, so I'm going to tell you the answer. And the answer is that the child was born before 1776, before it was the United States. Here's my second riddle, which is, what is it, the more you take, the more you leave behind? The answer is footsteps. My Third riddle. A woman from New York married 10 different men from that city, yet she did not break any laws. None of these men died, and she never divorced. How is this possible? The woman was the justice of the peace. And finally, the maker doesn't want it, the buyer doesn't use it, and the user doesn't see it. What is it? A coffin. Very profitable during the gold rush. So very often word games, songs, riddles would have been very popular entertainment in the home during the gold rush. Other times you would be taking materials from around the house. And so if you wanted a doll, you would make a doll made out of scraps of fabric you had because you would be making your own clothes. So any scraps of fabric together, and you'll actually see this activity, I know we've done it in the past around the holiday season, we'll have activities where we teach children in order to make rag dolls, just made out of little scraps of fabric like this. As well as, let's say, if you have some leftover washing fluid after you have some leftover soap from washing your dishes or your clothes or what have you, you get 2 sticks, a bit of string and something to string between it, and you could use this to blow bubbles by waving it through the air. Bubbles would have been always an enormously fun activity during the summer. Even today, children are still enchanted by being able to blow bubbles. Now, there are a number of other kinds of games. Another very popular genre of games during the gold rush would have been things like dexterity games. So, some of these you might recognize, like a yo-yo, or something like a Jacob's ladder, which I have a lovely assistant here. This is Kelly Lee, she's our interpreter 1 here in the park. I'm not good at Jacob's ladders, and so she's going to demonstrate how they work.
They're very tricky, and I don't know how they work. I can do it.
There are kids who can do all kinds of tricks with these. They'll just pick it up and then they'll start making up tricks with the yo-yos and the Jacob's ladders. Other games would be things like a hoop and skip. A stick, where you would take a stick and a hoop like this, and you would use the stick, and on a surface, you would strike it and try to keep it rolling for as long as possible, which is much harder than it sounds. Also, dexterity games like this, with the ball and cup, which I am not very good at. You can tell I didn't play this as a child because I did not develop the hand-eye coordination necessary to do it. As well as things like string figures. So things like cat's cradle, where you, and sometimes even with another individual, would use them to form complex patterns and be able to play games with a kind of string figures you can use with the excess string you had around the house. There were also things like games of skill, so things like jump rope, which would also come with an enormous repository of games and songs that people would sing while they were keeping time. As well as even baseball. Early baseball was also very popular during this time. As well as things like checkers and chess, which could be played with as much as a checkered handkerchief and a few marked tokens for either side. Now, all of these are very entertaining games, and now what's going to happen is I'm going to demonstrate some other games that would have been very popular during the gold rush using my wonderful assistant. We're going to step outside and show you how to play them yourself. Oh boy. So there are a number of toys during the gold rush which would have been played with, would have been very useful to play wherever you had a flat area. So those are things like marbles, and with tops, and with what we would someday known as jacks, which in the past have been known as 5 stones or knuckle bones. We're going to talk about tops first. So tops, hardwood tops, would have looked a little bit something like this. Now, these are historical tops, but they're not historical tops that we can use because traditionally the way that they would use is you would have a coil of string that you would wrap around the top. You would be standing, and as you toss it out, it would rapidly uncoil the string, and if you were good at it, it would land on the ground spinning. So there are all kinds of games that children would play with these tops. Of course, once you had mastered the art of actually making it land spinning, which I think is a challenge enough, honestly, but these kids were more inventive than I was. So one of the games that you can play with tops is something called Conqueror. So you would have 2 players, and you would spin off your tops into so that they would bounce off of each other, and whichever one managed to knock the other top over while their own staying upright would be the winner. Another game would be Peg in the Ring. So you would take a flat surface like this, and you would make a 3-foot diameter circle, and you would each have your spin, and you would throw it into, or you would peg, as it was called, you would peg your hardwood top into the circle, and whoever can get theirs landing spinning in the circle the most times would win. Another would be plugging. So this is another game where you would have a circle. One would have one in the center, and then everyone else would gang up on them and try to peg their tops at that one and try to knock that one out of the circle. The one which I personally think would be the most fun to play is one called Keep the Pot Boiling. So in Keep the Pot Boiling, each player would have 2 tops, and you would each have your 2 tops. You would start one spinning. By the time that one starts to fall, you would get your second one down and start it spinning before the other one could fall completely. And you had to make sure at least one of those tops was always spinning at all times. Whoever was the last one to have one of their tops spinning would be the one who was the winner. Now, we do not have these historical tops to play with today. Let's see. Do you want to play Conqueror?
Yes.
All right, so that's what's going to happen is we each have a top. It is not a historical top, but we're trying with what we have. These tops, we're going to try to spin them at each other so that they bounce. Whichever one remains upright for the longest is the winner. You ready, Kelly?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. Oh,
It's difficult to
It is very
get them
difficult.
to spin, let alone knock somebody over.
oh boy.
Like that.
I think that means we both lose. As you can see, the hardwood tops would probably behave very differently from these sort of traditional tops that we have here for demonstration purposes. One thing I do know we can do successfully is with marbles. So we have a little sachet of marbles there. So traditionally, you can play competitive marbles. So everyone would have a collection of marbles. And what you would do is you would have a big old circle, and you would put a whole bunch of marbles in the center. And if you were playing hardball with your marbles, you would be playing for keeps. You would have a marble, and you would use it to try to knock out whatever marbles in the circle outside. Any marble that you managed to knock out, you could keep for yourself. I'm sure there were definitely some kids who were good at this that definitely had like a marble racket going on. Now these are not historical marbles because they are made of glass. Traditionally, during the gold rush, these would have been made out of maybe wood, but especially with clay. And especially there would be kids who would make their own marbles out of clay. They would find a patch of clay and then bake their own marbles. The other game which people would play with marbles, which is the one we're going to demonstrate, is you would have a line in the dirt. And you see we've got a line in the dirt right here. I don't know how well it shows up on camera. And what you would do is you would have a marble, and you would try to shoot it to get as close to that line as possible without going over. And whoever has it the closest to the line is the winner. All right.
You ready?
You ready? All right.
Oh,
that's going to be
beat
real.
that one,
I don't think I
Kaitlyn.
can.
Now, can you knock me off the line? Can you do that in this game? Or
I don't know. I'm sure that there are all kinds of rules. But yeah, you try to get it as close as possible without going over.
The little ones
That was really
go
good
a
when
lot further. Oh, that's a good
There we
one,
go.
too.
I was a lot better at this game when we were testing earlier. So the final game, which we're going to demonstrate here, is going to be using that little pile of stones. Doesn't look like much, does it? So what I'm going to be demonstrating is what would become our modern game of jacks. It is a game which has been played for
pretty much hundreds, if not thousands of years. It showed up in a whole bunch of different cultures over time. And while today you might notice jacks as being little marble or little metal figurines and a bouncy ball, before you had little bouncy balls, what you would have is about 5 irregularly shaped objects. Traditionally, this can be anything that won't roll when you toss it onto the ground. So it might be like this, some irregular stones, thus the name 5 stones. It might be something like a fruit nut, so like a peach pit or an apricot pit. Or it might be a bone, a knuckle bone, thus the other name that you get. Whatever kind of animal you had. If you were a kid, you would be like, no, 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 don't throw those away. I want to use those for my knucklebone collection. So the way that you play knucklebones is you toss them all onto a flat surface, and just like jacks, you're going to toss this guy up in the air, try to grab one of these, and then catch it in midair before it can hit the ground.
Do you have to grab it with the same hand that you're throwing the rock up with?
I don't know. But I do know that for each consecutive turn, you had to make it more difficult. So you would go from tossing it up, and if you successfully do that, the next time you would have to grab 2. Or you would have to grab it with the back of your hand. I don't know if I'm even going to be able to do it with the initial challenge. So let's see how well this does. Oh. Nope. Boy.
My turn?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't think. Well, I think I can do it. How's that?
Okay.
If I throw it really high, I will have more time.
That's true. You will have more time. I'm just nervous of. Oh, that was close.
It was close. I'll try it again.
Oh, it bounced off. I think that counts. So the final game I would like to demonstrate today is something called the Game of Graces. And we're going to circle around here because we're going to need a little bit more room. For the Game of Graces, you would have a hoop like this, and you can see that we have a whole bunch of ribbon tied in regular segments. That is in order to make sure that this ring, when it goes flying through the air, it's going to stabilize it and try to keep it rotating smoothly and up in the air longer. The way you play the Game of Graces is each of us have these long sticks. You cross them like scissors so that the ring is on where they meet, balancing right there. Then I'm going to toss these at Kelly, rapidly pulling these away from each other while I push up in an upward motion. And that means that this ring is going to go flying through the air. She's going to catch them with the tip of her sticks. Let's see how we do. Oh!
Not too good first try.
All right.
Ready?
Yep. Oh, well, I didn't catch him with the sticks. All right, one more time.
Wild one.
So this was, as you might imagine, a very popular game with children, and especially so with girls. It was a very popular girls' game, but boys would also play. And I know this is also one of the activities. This is one of the activities that we tend to pull out during our back to school nights, where we demonstrate, finally, where we demonstrate what it's like during the school life of the children during the gold rush. And it's always a very popular activity. So I hope everyone enjoyed getting a little bit of a glimpse of what it is like to spend your time as a child during the gold rush. As we sort of close off here, I want everybody to be thinking about whether or not you would be able to play these games with things that you can find around your house. And whether or not you can, I especially want you to be thinking about why it might be more or less likely for you to have these kind of things in your house than it would be for a child during the gold rush. In the meantime, My name is Kaitlyn Moreland. This has been a live stream from Columbia State Historic Park. This has been my lovely volunteer, Kelly Lee, our interpreter 1. Please keep an eye on this page because we are hoping to do another live stream on the 29th, Friday the 29th, and I really look forward to seeing all of you there.
Yes.
I hope everybody stays safe, and I hope you enjoyed our time today. Have a good day.
See you next week.